You see this woman? Tunde's voice cut through the restaurant like a machete. She cannot even hold a proper conversation with civilized people. The laughter from his friends erupted around the table, loud, crude, encouraging. Champagne glasses clinked. Smoke from expensive cigars curled toward the crystal chandelier above. The Saturday night crowd at Azure Heights, one of Lagos's most exclusive restaurants, turned their heads toward the commotion. Ngozi's fingers tightened around her water glass. She did not look up. "Tunde, come on now," one of his friends started, but Tunde was already riding the wave of alcohol and arrogance. No, let me finish." He slammed his palm on the white tablecloth, rattling the silverware. "I'm sitting here with bankers, with CEOs, with men who move millions every day, and my own wife is here talking about tomatoes. Tomatoes! Can you imagine?" More laughter. Louder this time. Meaner. Ngozi had only mentioned the rising cost of food when Tunde's friend Chidi asked how she managed the household. A simple answer. A respectful contribution to the conversation, but Tunde had turned it into ammunition. "She went to university, you know," Tunde continued, his words slurring slightly as he gestured wildly with his brandy glass. "Studied accounting? But look at her now, concerned about the price of pepper and onions like a woman in the market." He laughed bitterly. "Sometimes I wonder what I married." The words hung in the air like poison. Across the table, Emeka stopped laughing. He was the only one. His eyes moved from Tunde's flushed, arrogant face to Ngozi's lowered head, to the way her chest rose and fell with controlled breathing. He saw what the others missed, the slight tremor in her jaw, the way her left hand had moved beneath the table. "Ah, Tunde, easy now," Emeka said quietly, but his voice was drowned out by another round of jeering from the group. "My guy, you don't suffer," Chidi howled, slapping the table. "Imagine bringing your wife to this kind of place and she's talking about market prices." "That's why I don't bring mine anywhere," another friend added. "Keep them at home where they belong." The men roared with approval. The testosterone-fueled mockery fed on itself, growing uglier with each passing second. Ngozi finally looked up. Not at Tunde, at the waiter hovering nervously nearby, unsure whether to approach or retreat. Her eyes were dry, clear, and almost frighteningly calm. "Excuse me," she said softly to the waiter. "May I have the bill for my meal, please?" "Separately." The table fell silent for a moment, confused, uncertain. Tunde's face darkened. "What are you doing?" "Paying for myself," Ngozi replied evenly. "Since you seem to find my presence here so embarrassing." "Don't be stupid," Tunde hissed, suddenly aware that the mockery had shifted. His friends were watching now, waiting to see how he would handle this unexpected defiance. "Sit down. Stop making a scene." "I'm making a scene?" For the first time that night, Ngozi's voice carried emotion. Not anger, but something colder. Something final. "You just spent 15 minutes telling these men what a disappointment I am. You mocked my education. You ridiculed my concerns about our household. You laughed at me in front of strangers." She stood. Her cream-colored wrapper remained perfectly arranged, despite the tension in her body. Every eye in the restaurant was on them now. "Ngozi, sit down!" Tunde's voice cracked with fury and embarrassment. "You're embarrassing me!" "No, Tunde." Her voice was steady as stone. "You already did that to yourself." "I said sit down!" Tunde shot to his feet, his chair screeching against the marble floor. The restaurant manager began moving toward their table. Emeka stood as well, placing himself slightly between Tunde and Ngozi, a subtle protective gesture. "Tunde, calm down," Emeka said firmly. "Don't tell me to calm down. This is my wife." Tunde jabbed a finger toward Ngozi. "She will sit when I tell her to sit." "I am nobody's pet," Ngozi said quietly. "I am not anymore." She placed exact cash on the table, enough to cover her untouched jollof rice and her drink. Then, with the same calm dignity she'd maintained throughout the entire humiliation, she picked up her small handbag and began walking toward the exit. "If you walk out of here, don't bother coming back home," Tunde shouted after her, his face twisted with rage and wounded pride. Ngozi paused. Just for a moment. The entire restaurant held its breath. She didn't turn around. She simply continued walking, her heels clicking softly against the floor, her head held impossibly high. The heavy glass doors of Azure Heights closed behind her with a whisper. Back at the table, the silence was suffocating. Tunde stood there, chest heaving, fists clenched. His friends exchanged uncomfortable glances. What had been entertainment moments ago now felt toxic, dangerous. The other diners were whispering, judging, recording the scene in their memories to share as gossip later. "My guy, you go too far," Chidi muttered, suddenly finding his drink very interesting. "She'll come back," Tunde said, more to himself than to anyone else. "She always does. Where else would she go?" He forced a laugh that sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Women and their drama. Give her a few hours to cool down." He sat heavily, reaching for his brandy glass. His hand shook slightly. Emeka remained standing. "I'm going to make sure she gets home safely." "Why?" Tunde's eyes narrowed with sudden suspicion. "You have interest in my wife?" "I have interest," Emeka said carefully. "Oik in making sure a woman who was just publicly humiliated doesn't get into a taxi alone at night in this part of Lagos. That's called being human, Tunde." He didn't wait for permission. He simply left, following the path Ngozi had taken minutes earlier. Outside, the night air was heavy with humidity and the smell of grilled suya from a nearby vendor. Emeka found Ngozi standing by the valet station, her back straight, her face turned toward the street as she waited for a taxi. Under the harsh sodium lights, Emeka could see what she'd hidden inside the restaurant. Tears. Silent tears streaming down her face. "Ngozi," he said gently. She turned, quickly wiping her cheeks. "I'm fine, Emeka. Please go back inside. No one in there deserves to sit at my table tonight." He moved closer, keeping a respectful distance. Do you have someone to call? Your sister? Your mother?" "They live in Enugu. I'll be fine." Her voice cracked on the last word. "Let me drive you home. Please." Tunde is drunk and stupid," Emeka interrupted, "and what he did in there was unforgivable." Ngozi looked at him then, really looked at him. Emeka had always been the quiet one in Tunde's circle of friends. Successful in his own right, a civil engineer with his own consulting firm, but never flashy about it. Never loud, never cruel. "Why are you being kind to me?" she asked softly. "Because kindness should be normal, not exceptional," Emeka replied. "And because I've watched Tunde change over the past year. The money, the contracts, the new lifestyle, it's made him forget things, important things. And like the fact that success means nothing if you lose your dignity in the process." A taxi pulled up to the curb. "I need to go," Ngozi said. "But thank you, Emeka, for not laughing, for seeing me." She got into the taxi before he could respond, and Emeka watched the red taillights disappear into Lagos traffic. He stood there for a long moment, hands in his pockets, replaying the scene in the restaurant. The mockery, the cruelty, the way Tunde's friends had fed his worst impulses. But most of all, he remembered the moment under the table that only he had noticed. When Ngozi thought no one was watching, she had slipped her wedding ring off her finger and placed it in her purse. Not in anger, not dramatically, just quietly, decisively, like a woman closing a door she would never open again. Miss Emeka pulled out his phone and typed a message to Tunde. "You made a terrible mistake tonight. I hope you realize it before it's too late." He didn't expect a response. Men like Tunde, drunk on new money and false friends, never saw the cliff until they'd already fallen off it. Inside the restaurant, Tunde ordered another round of drinks. His friends had moved on to other topics, other jokes. The humiliation of his wife was already forgotten, filed away as Saturday night entertainment. But in a quiet home in Lekki Phase 1, Ngozi sat on the edge of her bed, still wearing her wrapper, her makeup still perfect, despite the tears that had long since dried. On the nightstand beside her lay her wedding ring, and on her phone screen was a contact she hadn't called in years, Barrister Okonkwo, Family Law. Her finger hovered over the call button, then she pressed it. What do you think Ngozi should do next? Was she right to walk away, or should she have stayed and fought back in the restaurant? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear your perspective. And if you're invested in finding out what happens when Tunde realizes what he's lost, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Trust me, the courtroom confrontation is going to shake everything up. When they returned home, Ngozi did not cry. Silence can be louder than shouting. She paid the taxi driver and walked through the gate of their Lekki home, the house Tunde loved to show off to visiting friends. The one with the fountain in front and the marble lions flanking the entrance. The same house where she'd spent countless nights alone while he attended business dinners that always ran until midnight. The security guard, Musa, noticed her face and wisely said nothing. Inside, the house was cold despite Lagos's humid night air. The air conditioning hummed at full blast, another one of Tunde's extravagances. Everything had to be excessive. Everything had to announce wealth. Ngozi climbed the stairs to check on her daughters. 6-year-old Chiamaka was sprawled across her pink bed, one arm hanging off the edge, her favorite doll clutched in the other hand. 8-year-old Adana slept more neatly, her schoolbook still stacked on her desk from afternoon homework. Both peaceful, both innocent of what had happened tonight. I'm both unaware that their father had publicly declared their mother worthless. Ngozi stood in the doorway between their rooms, watching them breathe. These girls were her anchor, her purpose, the reason she had endured so much for so long. But was endurance the same as strength, or was it just another word for fear? She closed their doors gently and walked to the master bedroom, the room she decorated herself 3 years ago, before Tunde's construction company landed the government contract that changed everything. Back when they were still partners, back when he still listened when she spoke. Ngozi sat at her dressing table and began removing her jewel. Her hands moved mechanically, unpinning the carefully wrapped headpiece, unwinding the fabric. In the mirror, she studied her own face. 32 years old, still young, still whole. But tired, so deeply tired. The memories came unbidden, flooding back with painful clarity. 10 years ago, she had met Tunde at the University of Lagos. He was studying civil engineering, she was in accounting. He had dreams bigger than his pocket, ambition that burned like fire. She loved that about him, the hunger, the determination to build something from nothing. 9 years ago, their wedding, small, simple, in her father's church in Enugu. Tunde's family had objected. They wanted someone from their own town, their own tribe, but Tunde had fought for her. "This is the woman I choose," he'd told them. "She's the one who believes in me." She had believed. God, how she had believed. 8 years ago, Adana was born. Tunde was working 2 jobs, construction during the day, security guard at night. Money was so tight they ate rice and stew for weeks at a time, but they were happy. He would come home exhausted and still find energy to hold his baby girl, to kiss Ngozi's forehead, to whisper, "We're building something, just wait." 7 years ago, Tunde started his own small construction company. Ngozi managed the books, chased payments, negotiated with suppliers. She was 6 months pregnant with Chiamaka, but still going to sites, still making sure the workers were paid on time even when clients delayed. 5 years ago, the breakthrough. A government contract to build low-income housing in Abuja. It wasn't huge, but it was legitimate. It was the beginning. Ngozi remembered the night Tunde got the confirmation letter. He'd lifted her off her feet, spinning her around their small apartment living room. "We did it, baby!" We actually did it. We. He'd said we. 3 years ago. More contracts, bigger projects, money flowing in faster than they'd ever imagined. They moved to this house in Lekki, bought the Mercedes, hired household staff, and somewhere in the cascade of success, Tunde stopped saying we. It became, I built this company. I landed this contract. I made this happen. Ngozi's contributions, the years of keeping books, managing the household on nothing, supporting his dreams, faded from his memory like morning mist. 2 years ago, the new friends arrived, men with louder voices, bigger egos, younger girlfriends, men who measured success in champagne bottles and designer labels, men who treated their wives like accessories, expensive, interchangeable, disposable. Tunde began staying out later, drinking more, talking less. And when he did talk to her, it was different, dismissive, impatient. "You don't understand business. This is men's talk. Why don't you focus on the children?" 1 year ago. Ngozi tried to talk to him, suggested marriage counseling. He'd laughed, not cruelly yet, but close enough. "Counseling? What are we, Americans? There's nothing wrong with our marriage. You're just being emotional." 6 months ago. He stopped coming to bed at the same time she did, stopped asking about her day, stopped noticing when she bought a new dress or changed her hair. She became background noise in his success story. Tonight, the restaurant, the humiliation, the final proof that she wasn't his partner anymore. She was his servant, his property, his reminder of humble beginnings he now wanted to forget. Ngozi finished removing her makeup with the same methodical precision she applied to everything. She changed out of her wrapper into a simple nightgown. She sat on the edge of the bed. And she waited. Not for Tunde. She knew he wouldn't come home for hours. He'd stay at the restaurant, order more drinks, laugh with those horrible men, convince himself that he'd done nothing wrong. She was waiting for clarity, for certainty, because the decision she was about to make would change everything. Her phone buzzed. A text from her younger sister, Adaeze, in Enugu. "How was the dinner? Did Tunde's friends like you?" Ngozi stared at the message for a long time. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could lie. She could say it was fine. She could protect Tunde's image one more time. Instead, she typed, "I'll call you tomorrow." "Unimportant." Another buzz. This time from Emeka. "Home safe? If you need anything, please reach out. What happened tonight was wrong." She saved his number, just in case. Then she opened her phone's browser and searched, "How to file for divorce in Lagos." At 2:47 a.m., Tunde's Mercedes pulled into the driveway. Ngozi heard the car door slam, heard his unsteady footsteps on the tile floor downstairs, heard him bark something at Musa about leaving the gate light on. He climbed the stairs heavily, bumping against the wall once. When he pushed open the bedroom door, alcohol fumes preceded him into the room. Ngozi was sitting up in bed, reading on her iPad. She didn't look up. "You're still awake," Tunde said, his words slurred but his tone accusatory, as if her consciousness was somehow offensive. "I live here," Ngozi replied calmly. "They don't start." He began undressing, throwing his clothes on the floor, something he knew she hated. "You embarrassed me tonight." That made her look up. "I embarrassed you?" "Walking out like that, making a scene. My friends were laughing at me after you left." "They were already laughing," Ngozi said quietly. "At me. With your encouragement." Tunde waved a dismissive hand. "It was just jokes, banter. You're too sensitive." "You called me stupid in front of strangers." "I didn't call you stupid. I said you were talking about stupid things." He sat heavily on the bed. "There's a difference." "Is there?" He turned to look at her then, his eyes bleary but narrowing with suspicion. "What's this attitude? You think because you walked out of one dinner, you're some kind of hero now? Ngozi closed her iPad, set it on the nightstand next to her wedding ring, which she'd deliberately left there, visible, symbolic. I think, she said carefully, that tonight showed me something I've been avoiding for a long time. And what's that? Tunde's voice carried the dangerous edge of a drunk man looking for a fight. That you don't respect me, that you haven't respected me for years, and that I've been allowing it because I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of being alone, of raising our daughters without a father, of admitting that I made a mistake. Tunde stood up abruptly. A mistake? I'm a mistake. I gave you this house. Those children have everything they need. You live like a queen. I live like a prisoner in a golden cage, Ngozi said. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. And our daughters are learning that this is what marriage looks like, that this is how men should treat women. Don't bring the children into this. They're already in it, Tunde. Adana asked me last week why you never eat dinner with us anymore. Chiamaka draws pictures of our family and you're always in a separate corner of the page. He stared at her, swaying slightly. You're being dramatic. No. Ngozi stood as well, facing him across the bed. I'm being honest. Finally. Fine. You want honesty? Tunde's face twisted into something ugly. You've become boring, Ngozi. All you talk about is children and housework. You don't even try anymore. When was the last time you went to the gym? When was the last time you read a book that wasn't about parenting? Each word was designed to hurt. Each one landed. But instead of crumbling, Ngozi felt something unexpected. Relief. Because he'd finally said out loud what she'd suspected for months. He didn't want a partner, he wanted a trophy, and she had aged out of the competition. You're right, she said softly. I did stop trying. I stopped trying to impress you, to perform for you, to shrink myself into whatever shape would make you happy. And you know why? Tunde said nothing. Because it was never enough. When I was thin, you wanted me curvier. When I was quiet, you wanted me more social. When I was social, you said I was showing off. I exhausted myself trying to be what you wanted, and you still looked at me like I was a disappointment. That's not... Don't, Ngozi interrupted. Don't lie to me anymore, Tunde. Please. We're past that now. He sank back onto the bed, suddenly looking less drunk and more confused. What are you saying? Ngozi picked up her wedding ring from the nightstand, held it between her thumb and forefinger, studying it in the lamplight. I'm saying, she began slowly, that I need you to leave this bedroom tonight, sleep in the guest room, and tomorrow we need to have a very serious conversation about our future. You're throwing me out of my own bedroom? I'm asking you, Ngozi said, to give me space to think. Unless you'd prefer I take the girls and go to my sister's house in Enugu instead? Tunde's eyes widened. You wouldn't. The certainty in his voice, that assumption that she would never actually leave, told Ngozi everything she needed to know. He still didn't believe she was serious. He still thought this was theater, a performance, a woman's tantrum that would pass by morning. Guest room, Tunde, she repeated. Eat now. For a moment, he looked like he might argue, might assert his authority as the man of the house, the provider, the one whose name was on the deed. But something in Ngozi's face stopped him. Maybe it was the absolute calm, the lack of tears or shouting, the quiet certainty of a woman who had already made her decision and was simply waiting for the world to catch up. Tunde grabbed his pillow and a spare blanket without another word. At the door, he paused. You'll regret this. Maybe, Ngozi acknowledged, but I'll never regret it more than I regret tonight. He left, the door closed, and in the sudden silence of the master bedroom, Ngozi finally allowed herself to cry. Not from weakness, from grief. For the marriage that had died long before tonight. For the man Tunde used to be. for the dreams they'd built together that he'd claimed as his own. She cried until her tears ran dry, until her chest stopped heaving, until the sky outside began to lighten with the first hint of dawn. Then she picked up her phone and sent a message to Barrister Okonkwo. "I need to file for divorce. When can we meet?" The response came within minutes. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. My office. I'll make time." Ngozi set the phone down and lay back against her pillows. In the next room, she could hear Tunde's snoring, loud, oblivious, already asleep. But Ngozi didn't sleep. She was already planning, already calculating, already preparing for the war she knew was coming. Because men like Tunde never let go easily. And the humiliation he'd felt tonight at the restaurant would be nothing compared to the rage he'd feel when those divorce papers arrived. But for the first time in years, Ngozi wasn't afraid. She was ready. What would you do in Ngozi's position? Should she have tried counseling first, or was the divorce decision justified after what happened? Let me know in the comments. In the courtroom, truth finally spoke louder than pride. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning. Tunde was in his home office reviewing construction bids for a new shopping complex project when their housemaid, Blessing, knocked timidly on the door. "Oga, someone deliver letter for you." He didn't look up from his laptop. "Put it on the desk." "Oga, the man say I must give you direct. Say you must sign." That got his attention. Tunde swiveled in his leather chair, irritation flashing across his face. "What kind of letter needs—" He stopped mid-sentence when he saw the official seal on the envelope Blessing held out. Lagos State High Court. His stomach dropped. "Who brought this?" His voice came out sharp, suspicious. "Court bailiff, sir. He'd wait outside for your signature." Tunde snatched the envelope, scrawled his signature on the bailiff's logbook without reading it, and slammed the office door. His hands trembled slightly as he tore open the seal. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Petitioner: Mrs. Ngozi Adaku Okafor. Respondent: Mr. Tunde Chukwuma Okafor. The words blurred together. Irreconcilable differences, emotional cruelty, abandonment of marital responsibilities, sole custody of minor children. Tunde read it 3 times, certain he was misunderstanding. Ngozi was divorcing him. Actually divorcing him. It had been 2 weeks since the restaurant incident. 2 weeks of cold silence in the house. 2 weeks of her sleeping in the guest room with the door locked. 2 weeks of her barely speaking to him except about the children's schedules. He'd assumed she was punishing him, teaching him a lesson, playing the long game of wifely manipulation that all women played. He'd never imagined she was serious. "Ngozi!" His roar echoed through the house. He found her in the kitchen, calmly preparing the girls' lunch boxes for school. She was wearing a simple blue dress, her hair tied back in a neat bun. She looked up at him with the same infuriating calm she'd maintained for 2 weeks. "Yes?" He threw the papers on the kitchen counter. "What the hell is this?" Ngozi glanced at the documents, then returned to slicing cucumbers. "Exactly what it says. I'm filing for divorce." "Are you insane?" Tunde's voice cracked with disbelief and rage. "Over one argument? One night?" "It wasn't one night, Tunde." Her knife work remained steady, precise. "It was years. That night was just the moment I finally saw it clearly." "You can't do this." "I already did." "I'll fight you." He jabbed a finger at the papers. "You think you can take my children, my house, everything I built?" Ngozi set down the knife and turned to face him fully. "I don't want your house. I don't want to take anything you built. I just want dignity. And I want our daughters to grow up knowing their worth." "Their worth?" Tunde laughed bitterly. "You're destroying their family and you talk about worth?" "I'm showing them," Ngozi said quietly, "that no woman should accept being treated the way you treated me." Before Tunde could respond, Adana appeared in the kitchen doorway, school uniform on, backpack over her shoulders. "Mummy, it's time to go." Ngozi's expression softened instantly. "Yes, baby, let's get your sister." She picked up the lunch boxes and walked past Tunde without another glance, leaving him standing in the kitchen with the divorce papers scattered across the counter. That was the moment Tunde realized she meant every word, and that was the moment his pride transformed into something darker. Vengeance. 6 months later, Lagos State High Court, Family Division. The courtroom smelled of old wood polish and recycled air. The ceiling fans rotated slowly overhead, barely disturbing the humid air. Rows of wooden benches faced the judge's elevated platform, where Justice Adebayo, a stern woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, presided over the dissolution of marriages. Ngozi sat at the petitioner's table with Barrister Okonkwo, a formidable woman in her 40s whose reputation for winning custody cases was legendary. Ngozi wore a modest navy wrapper and white blouse, her hair covered respectfully. Her hands were folded in her lap, her face composed. Across the aisle, Tunde sat with his lawyer, Barrister Odenigwe, an aggressive litigator known for destroying opponents on the witness stand. Tunde wore an expensive three-piece suit, gold cufflinks catching the light. He looked every inch the successful businessman. Behind Ngozi, her sister Adaizi sat in the public gallery, along with her elderly mother who had traveled from Enugu. Their presence was quiet, but solid. Behind Tunde sat Chidi and 2 other friends from the restaurant night. Emeka was conspicuously absent from Tunde's side. Instead, Emeka sat 3 rows behind Ngozi. When Tunde had noticed, his face had darkened with fury. "All rise," the court clerk announced. Justice Adebayo entered, her black robes flowing, her expression revealing nothing. Everyone stood, then sat again at her gesture. "Case number FD/2547/2025, the clerk read. Okafor versus Okafor. Petition for dissolution of marriage. The judge looked over her reading glasses at both parties. "I have reviewed the filed documents. This hearing will determine custody arrangements and financial responsibilities. Barrister Okonkwo, you may begin." What followed was 3 hours of testimony that stripped away every pretense. Barrister Okonkwo was surgical in her questioning. "Mrs. Okafor, please describe your husband's behavior on the night of January 15th at Azure Heights Restaurant." Ngozi spoke clearly, without dramatization. She recounted every insult, every laugh, every moment of humiliation. Her voice never wavered, never broke. When she described removing her wedding ring under the table, several people in the gallery gasped softly. "And how long had this pattern of disrespect been occurring?" Barrister Okonkwo asked. "Approximately 2 years, Ngozi replied, "since his business began succeeding." "Objection!" Barrister Odenigwe shot to his feet. "The petitioner is characterizing normal marital disagreements as abuse." "Overruled," Justice Adebayo said dryly. "Let her speak," Ngozi continued. She detailed the nights Tunde never came home, and the business trips where he returned smelling of perfume that wasn't hers, the parent-teacher conferences he missed, the birthdays he forgot. And the children's relationship with their father? Ngozi's composure finally cracked slightly. "They love him, but they barely know him. Adana stopped asking when Daddy would be home for dinner because the answer was always maybe. Chiamaka draws our family pictures with her father in a different room." She produced the drawing. The judge examined it silently, her expression darkening. Then it was Tunde's turn. Barrister Odenigwe tried to paint him as a devoted provider, a hard-working man whose only crime was success. "Mr. Okafor, how many hours per week do you work?" 70, 80 sometimes. Building a business requires sacrifice. "And you provide well for your family?" "Extremely well. And they live in a 4-bedroom house in Lekki. The children attend the best private school. My wife never worked because she never had to." Never had to or wasn't allowed to? Barrister Okonkwo interjected when her turn came. Objection. Sustained. Rephrase. Barrister Okonkwo smiled. Mr. Okafor, did your wife work before your business succeeded? Tunda shifted uncomfortably. She helped with bookkeeping. Helped? Or managed your entire accounting system for 3 years while pregnant and raising a toddler? She contributed. Did she receive salary for this contribution? We were married. What's mine was hers. Was it? Barrister Okonkwo produced financial records. These bank statements show that you opened 3 separate accounts in your name only, accounts your wife had no access to. Accounts containing over 40 million naira, the gallery murmured. Justice Adebayo banged her gavel once. Tunde's face flushed. That's business money. Business she helped build. Yet when she asked for funds to start her own small trading business last year, you refused? Why? She didn't need to work. Or you didn't want her to have independence. Objection! Barrister Odenigwe was on his feet, badgering the witness. I'm establishing a pattern of financial control, Your Honor. It's relevant to the custody determination. Overruled. Answer the question, Mr. Okafor. Tunda's jaw clenched. I thought her focus should be on the home. The home you were never in? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Then came the character witnesses. Emeka was called to testify. Tunda's face contorted with rage as his former friend took the stand. Mr. Emeka Nwosu, you were present at Azure Heights Restaurant on January 15th? Yes. Please describe what you witnessed. Emeka spoke carefully, honestly. He described the mockery, the cruelty, Tunde's obvious intoxication. He described Ngozi's dignity, her calm, her pain. And why didn't you laugh along with the others? Barrister Okonkwo asked. Because, Emeka said quietly, looking directly at Tunde, I was watching a good man destroy himself, and a good woman finally refused to be destroyed with him. Tunde exploded. You've been sleeping with her. That's what this is about. Mr. Okafor! Justice Adebayo's voice cracked like a whip. One more outburst and I will hold you in contempt. He's been circling my wife like a vulture. Silence. The gavel slammed 3 times. Tunde's lawyer pulled him back into his seat, whispering urgently. Emeka remained calm. I have never behaved inappropriately with Mrs. Okafor. I have offered her friendship and support during a difficult time. Nothing more. Yet you're here today, supporting her claim? I'm here, Emeka said, because I witnessed emotional abuse, and because silence makes you complicit. The testimony continued. Neighbors testified about hearing Tunde's late-night returns, his shouting. The children's school teachers testified about Adana's anxiety, about how she flinched when voices were raised. By the time Justice Adebayo called for closing arguments, the portrait was complete. Barrister Okonkwo stood. Your Honor, this is not a case of a woman seeking to profit from divorce. Mrs. Okafor is requesting only what is fair, custody of children her husband has emotionally abandoned, and financial support proportional to his means. She has endured years of disrespect, neglect, and public humiliation. She is asking this court to grant her what her husband never would: dignity. Barrister Odenigwe's closing was aggressive, attacking Ngozi's motives, questioning her evidence, insisting Tunde was a victim of a vindictive wife. But the judge's expression suggested she'd already decided. Justice Adebayo removed her glasses, cleaning them slowly while the courtroom held its breath. I have presided over many divorce cases, she began. Most involve 2 people who simply grew apart. Some involve genuine incompatibility. This case is different. She looked directly at Tunde. Mr. Okafor, you have built financial success. That is admirable. But you have done so at the expense of your family's emotional well-being. You have treated your wife not as a partner, but as property. You have treated your children not as relationships to nurture, but as obligations to fund. Tunde's hands gripped the table edge. The evidence shows a pattern of emotional neglect, public humiliation, and financial control. While you claim to provide for your family, provision is more than money. It is presence. It is respect. It is partnership. Justice Adebayo put her glasses back on. I hereby grant the petition for dissolution of marriage. Custody of the minor children, Adana and Chiamaka Okafor, is awarded to the petitioner, Mrs. Ngozi Okafor, with supervised visitation rights for the respondent every other weekend. Tunde's face went white. The respondent is ordered to pay monthly child support of 500,000 naira plus educational expenses. The marital home in Lekki shall be sold, with proceeds divided 60-40 in favor of the petitioner, accounting for her unpaid contributions to the respondent's business during its formative years. The gavel fell. This court is adjourned. Ngozi stood slowly. She felt Adaisy's hand on her shoulder, her mother's quiet prayer of thanks behind her. Across the aisle, Tunde sat frozen, his lawyer gathering papers with quick, embarrassed movements. As Ngozi walked toward the exit, she passed Tunde's row. He looked up at her, and for the first time since that restaurant night, she saw something other than arrogance in his face. Fear. And the fear of a man who had just lost everything that mattered and only now realized what it was worth. Ngozi! She kept walking. Outside the courtroom, Emeka waited respectfully at a distance. When Ngozi emerged with her family, he simply nodded. She nodded back. No words were needed. Justice, she discovered, didn't feel triumphant. It felt necessary, and terribly, terribly sad. Do you think the judge's ruling was fair? Should Tunde get more visitation rights, or was this the right decision for the children? Share your thoughts below. Next chapter is where we see how both their lives unfold after this moment. You won't believe how differently things turn out for each of them. Subscribe so you don't miss it. The transformation is shocking. Years passed, and peace slowly grew where pain once lived. 3 years after the divorce, Ngozi woke to the sound of rain against her bedroom window, the gentle kind that made Lagos mornings feel clean and new. She stretched, feeling the absence of tension she'd carried for so long. It had felt like part of her skeleton. The small 2-bedroom apartment in Surulere wasn't Lekki. It didn't have marble lions or fountains. But it was hers. Every piece of furniture, every curtain, every dish, chosen by her, paid for by her, arranged the way she wanted. Freedom, she'd learned, didn't always look expensive. From the next room, she heard her daughter's voices, Chiamaka singing off-key while Adana told her to be quiet so she could concentrate on her homework. 11 and 9 now. Growing so fast, it sometimes hurt to watch. Ngozi smiled and got out of bed. The small catering business had started simply. She's 6 months after the divorce. Using her settlement money wisely, Ngozi had registered Mama's Touch catering services. Just her, a rented commercial kitchen space twice a week, and recipes her own mother had taught her. The first client had been Adazi's church, a small wedding reception for 60 people. The second had been a children's birthday party. The third had been a corporate luncheon that led to a contract with a medium-sized tech company. Word spread the way good food always does, through satisfied stomachs and sincere recommendations. 3 years later, Mama's Touch had 4 employees, a small delivery van with her logo painted on the side, and a waiting list that stretched 2 months for weekend events. Ngozi wasn't wealthy, but she was stable, independent, proud, and most importantly, respected. And her clients didn't care that she was divorced. They cared that her jollof rice was perfectly seasoned, her small chops were always fresh, and she showed up on time every time with professionalism and a genuine smile. She'd rebuilt herself one catering order at a time. "Mummy, we're going to be late," Adana called from the living room. Ngozi finished braiding Chiamaka's hair and checked her watch. "We have 20 minutes. That's plenty of time." "Uncle Emeka said he'd pick us up at 7:30, Adana reminded her. Uncle Emeka had become part of their routine so gradually that Ngozi couldn't pinpoint exactly when it happened. It had started innocently, him checking in occasionally after the divorce, asking if she needed anything, offering to help move furniture when she first rented this apartment. Then it was attending Adana's school play because Ngozi's catering van had broken down and she couldn't leave a client's event. Then it was fixing Chiamaka's bicycle on a Saturday afternoon when Ngozi admitted she had no idea how. Then it was dinners, first with the girls present, always respectful, always appropriate. Then, after a year, occasionally just the two of them, talking for hours about everything and nothing. Emeka had courted her the way men used to court women in old stories, with patience, with respect, with zero assumptions about where it was leading. He'd waited 2 full years before even holding her hand. "I'm not trying to replace what you lost," he'd told her one evening as they sat on her small balcony watching Lagos traffic crawl below. "I'm hoping to build something new, something different, something better." "And if I'm not ready," Ngozi had asked, "then I'll wait until you are, or I'll remain your friend. Either way, I'm not going anywhere." 6 months ago, she'd finally been ready. They'd married quietly at a registry. Just immediate family, no elaborate ceremony, no performance. Adana and Chiamaka had worn matching yellow dresses and held flowers. Ngozi had worn a simple cream dress and carried her mother's Bible. It wasn't the fairy tale wedding young girls dream about. It was better. It was real. Emeka's car horn honked gently outside. The girls grabbed their school bags and raced to the door. Ngozi followed, locking up carefully, checking twice because that's what responsible single mothers did. Emeka stood by his modest Toyota, dressed for work in a simple blue caftan. When he saw Ngozi, his face did what it always did, softened into genuine pleasure. "Good morning, beautiful," he said. Chiamaka giggled. "Uncle Emeka, you say that every day." "Because it's true every day," he replied, opening the car door for them. In the car, Adana chattered about her upcoming science project. Chiamaka sang songs from her school's music class. Emeka drove carefully, asking questions, laughing at their jokes, treating their stories as if they were the most important things he'd hear all day. Ngozi watched him from the passenger seat. This was what partnership looked like. Not expensive restaurants or designer clothes, just a man who showed up, who listened, who cared about the small moments that made up a life. After dropping the girls at school, Emeka drove Ngozi to her commercial kitchen space. "Big event today?" he asked. Corporate luncheon, 80 people, tech company and VI. She checked her prep list on her phone. "Should be done by 3 p.m. I'll pick up the girls from school then. We can all have dinner together." "You don't have to." "I want to," Emeka said simply. "That's the difference." He kissed her forehead and drove off to his own engineering consulting firm. Ngozi stood there for a moment, watching his car disappear into traffic. That's the difference. Tunda had done things out of obligation, out of image, out of what looked good to others. Emeka did things because he wanted to, because it brought him joy, because love to him was verb, something you did, not something you claimed. Meanwhile, across Lagos, in a significantly smaller apartment in Yaba, Tunda woke up alone. Again. The bedroom smelled stale. Takeout containers from 3 days ago still sat on the nightstand. His phone showed 17 missed calls from Chidi, probably asking for money again. Tunde stared at the ceiling, feeling the familiar weight of regret settle on his chest like a physical thing. 3 years since the divorce. 3 years of watching everything he'd built crumble like sand castles at high tide. It had started with the business. 6 months after losing the court case, his major government contact, the one who'd been feeding him lucrative projects, got arrested for corruption. The investigation swept through everyone associated with him. Tunde's company wasn't implicated in anything illegal, but the association was enough. Contracts dried up. Clients went elsewhere. The construction industry in Lagos was small and gossipy. The word spread that Tunde Okafor's golden touch had tarnished. He'd had to sell the Lekki house, the one with the marble lions, to pay debts and legal fees. The Mercedes went next, then the office space. Now he operated from a single room with a laptop and a phone that rang less and less. His friends, Chidi and the others who'd laughed at his jokes, who'd encouraged his cruelty, who'd made him feel like a king, had disappeared the moment the money stopped flowing. Turns out, those friendships had been transactions all along. Only Emeka had tried to maintain contact, calling occasionally, offering advice, suggesting business opportunities. But Tunde's pride wouldn't let him accept help from the man who'd stolen his wife. Never mind that Emeka had waited 2 years. Never mind that Ngozi had made her own choices. In Tunde's mind, the betrayal was complete, the narrative fixed. So he'd stopped answering Emeka's calls, and now he was alone. Tunde forced himself out of bed and shuffled to the bathroom. The mirror showed a man who looked older than 38, graying at the temples, lines around his eyes. The gym membership had lapsed, one of many things he could no longer afford. He was supposed to see his daughters today, every other Saturday, the court order said. But every other Saturday he found reasons not to go. Too busy, too tired, too ashamed. The truth was simpler and more painful. His daughters barely knew him. And what they did know, they didn't particularly like. Adana was polite but distant when he called. Chiamaka was friendly but treated him like a distant uncle, not a father. Last month, when he'd actually shown up for his visitation, Chiamaka had accidentally called Emeka daddy in front of him. The word had hit Tunde like a physical blow. Uncle Emeka, Ngozi had corrected gently, but Chiamaka had shrugged. But he is like my daddy. He comes to my school things. He helps with my homework. He plays with me. What could Tunde say to that? That he was her real father? That biology mattered more than presence? He'd sat through that awkward Saturday afternoon watching his daughters be polite strangers, then driven back to his small apartment and gotten drunk for 3 days straight. His phone buzzed. Another message from Chidi. Guy, you get 50,000 to lend me? I go pay back next week. Tunde deleted it without responding. Chidi had been paying back next week for 18 months now. A different notification appeared. Reminder, Adana's 11th birthday party, Sunday 2 p.m., Mama's Touch Events Hall, Surulere. Ngozi had sent the invitation 3 weeks ago. Professional, polite, informational. She'd even included, your attendance would mean a lot to Adana. But would it? Or would it just be awkward, him showing up at a party planned by his ex-wife and her new husband, surrounded by their new life, their new happiness? Him, the ghost of bad decisions past. Tunde sat on his bed, holding the phone, staring at the invitation. He'd missed Adana's 8th, 9th, and 10th birthdays, made excuses every time, sent money instead of presents. Money was easier. Money didn't require him to face what he'd lost. But looking at that invitation now, something cracked inside him. A painful realization. His daughters were growing up without him, not because of the divorce, not because of Ngozi, not because of Emeka, because of his own choices. Every missed visit, every forgotten call, every excuse. He was erasing himself from their lives one absence at a time. And one day, soon, they would stop sending invitations altogether. Tunde looked around his small apartment, at the life he'd built after losing everything. It was empty. Successful people surrounded by things but devoid of connection. He'd traded his family for pride. And pride, it turned out, was a terrible companion. It didn't laugh at your jokes. It didn't hold your hand when you were scared. It didn't call you daddy with genuine affection, Pride just sat there, cold and hard and unforgiving, reminding you of every mistake while offering no path to redemption. Tunde typed out a message to Ngozi. "I'll be there. Sunday 2 p.m. Thank you for including me." He stared at it for 5 minutes before hitting send. Her response came quickly. "She'll be happy to see you." 5 words. Polite. Kind. No bitterness. That somehow made it worse. Ngozi had moved on, healed, built a new life, and Tunde was still trapped in the wreckage of the old one, unable to figure out how to climb free. Sunday arrived with clear blue skies. Mama's Touch Events hall was modest but charming. Colorful balloons, a table laden with food that smelled incredible, children running and laughing, adults chatting comfortably. Tunde arrived exactly at 2 p.m., carrying an expensive wrapped gift that had cost more than he could afford. And he stood outside for 3 full minutes, gathering courage before walking in. Ngozi saw him first. She looked happy, genuinely, peacefully happy. Simple dress, natural hair, minimal makeup. She'd gained a little weight, the healthy kind that came from not being stressed constantly. She smiled when she saw him. "Tunde, I'm glad you came." "Wouldn't miss it," he lied. Then Emeka appeared beside her, and Tunde's stomach clenched. But Emeka just extended his hand. "Tunde, good to see you." No possessiveness, no territoriality, just simple courtesy. Tunde shook his hand, hating how genuine Emeka's welcome seemed. "Daddy!" Chiamaka came running, throwing herself at Emeka's legs. "Uncle Segan is here and he brought his guitar. Can we do music?" "Of course, princess," Emeka said, ruffling her hair. She ran off without even noticing Tunde standing there. The word daddy echoed in Tunde's head. Adana approached more slowly. She'd grown so much, looked so mature, almost a young woman now. "Hi, Dad," she said politely. "Happy birthday, Adana," Tunde managed, holding out the gift. She took it, thanked him, set it with the others. Then silence. They stood there, father and daughter, with nothing to say to each other. "The food looks good," Tunde tried. "Mummy's catering company did everything," Adana said, pride evident in her voice. "She made my favorite, coconut rice and chicken, and Uncle Emeka helped set up the decorations this morning." Uncle Emeka, Mummy's catering, their life. He wasn't part of it anymore. "That's nice," Tunde said weakly. One of Adana's friends called her name. Oh, and she excused herself gratefully. Tunde stood alone at his daughter's birthday party, surrounded by her happy life, realizing he was the outsider now. He watched Ngozi laugh with guests, watched Emeka help serve food, joke with children, treat the girls with easy affection, watched his former life continue beautifully without him, and understood finally what he'd lost. Not a wife, not a house, not status or money. He'd lost this, the ordinary precious moments that make up a family. The inside jokes, the casual touches, the sense of belonging. He'd thrown it away for what? For pride? For image? For the approval of men who'd abandoned him the moment he was no longer useful? Tunde stayed for exactly 1 hour, then made an excuse about work and left. No one tried to stop him. As he drove back to his empty apartment, he passed a billboard advertising luxury apartments in Ikoyi, the kind of place he'd once aspired to own, the kind of place that meant nothing if you lived there alone. Should Tunde be given another chance to rebuild his relationship with his daughters, or has he lost that opportunity forever? What would you do in Adana's position? Let me know in the comments. For the first time in his life, Tunde understood something money could not fix. 5 years after the divorce. Tunde sat in a modest bar in Ikeja, nursing his 3rd beer of the evening. The television above the counter played a news segment he wasn't watching. His phone lay face down on the scarred wooden bar top. He'd stopped checking it obsessively. There were no important calls coming, no deals to close, no friends to meet, just silence. The bartender and a young man who'd seen Tunde here too many times wiped down the counter nearby. "Another one, sir?" Tunde shook his head. 3 was his limit now. He'd learned that lesson the hard way. Drinking away pain only created new pain the next morning. His phone buzzed. He turned it over reluctantly. A photo. From Ngozi's number. His breath caught. It was Adana. 13 years old now, wearing a secondary school graduation gown, holding a certificate, first in her class. Her smile was radiant, proud. Standing on either side of her were Ngozi and Emeka, their hands on her shoulders. A family portrait of achievement. The message below read, "Thought you'd want to know. She worked very hard." Tunde stared at the photo until his vision blurred. His daughter, his brilliant daughter, graduating with honors. Yeah, and he'd had no idea she was even taking the exams. When had he last called her? 2 months ago? 3? When had he last shown up for his visitation? He couldn't remember. The invitations had stopped coming a year ago, not because Ngozi was cruel, but because Adana herself had asked her mother to stop sending them. "He never comes anyway, Mummy. It just makes me feel bad when I expect him and he doesn't show up." Ngozi had told him this gently during one of their brief phone conversations about child support payments, which he now struggled to make on time. "She's not angry with you," Ngozi had said. "She's just protecting herself from him." His own daughter was protecting herself from him. Tunde typed out a response. "Congratulations to her. I'm proud." He stared at the words. How hollow they sounded. How meaningless. What right did he have to be proud? He'd contributed nothing to this achievement except DNA and irregular payments. He deleted the message and typed again. "I'm sorry I wasn't there." Better, more honest. But still not enough. Nothing would ever be enough. He pressed send anyway. Ngozi's response came quickly. "You can still change that. The door isn't locked, Tunde. You just have to actually walk through it." Could he, though? Could a man who'd destroyed everything actually rebuild? Not the business. He'd long since accepted that his construction empire was gone forever. The corruption scandal had tainted him permanently. But could he rebuild what mattered? Could he become the father his daughters deserved, even this late? Tunde paid his bill and walked out into the Lagos evening. The air was thick with humidity and exhaust fumes. The street vendors called out their wares. Okadas weaved through traffic with suicidal confidence. Life continued, indifferent to his pain. He thought about Emeka, the man who'd taken his place, not stolen. Taken would imply force. Emeka had simply been present when Tunde was absent, had been kind when Tunde was cruel, had valued what Tunde had discarded. There was no villain in this story except the one Tunde saw in the mirror each morning. He walked for blocks, not heading anywhere in particular, just moving because stillness felt like drowning. Eventually, he found himself outside a small church. Wednesday evening service was ending. Families filed out, parents holding children's hands, teenagers laughing in groups, elderly couples walking slowly together. Community, belonging, connection. Oh, all the things money couldn't buy and pride had cost him. A couple passed him, the husband saying something that made his wife laugh, that comfortable laugh of people who'd been together long enough to have inside jokes. Tunde remembered making Ngozi laugh like that. Back when they were building something together. Back when we meant something. That man was gone, had died somewhere between the first government contract and the restaurant humiliation. And this man, the one standing outside a church at 40 years old with nothing to show for his life except regrets, who was he? Could he become someone his daughters would want to know? Tunde pulled out his phone and typed a message to Ngozi. "When is good time to call Adana? I want to hear her voice. Actually hear it." not just send congratulations through you. The response took longer this time. He imagined Ngozi discussing it with Emeka, making a decision together, the way partners did. Finally, Saturday, 10 a.m. I'll make sure she's available, but Tunde, please don't promise if you're not going to follow through. She's old enough now to really hurt from it. I'll be there, he typed. I promise. But even as he sent it, doubt whispered in his ear. How many promises had he already broken? How many times had his word meant nothing? Saturday, 10 a.m., 2 days away. 48 hours to decide if he was serious about change or just drowning in temporary guilt that would fade like it always did. Tunde looked up at the dark Lagos sky, where stars struggled to shine through the city's light pollution. Some things, once lost, could never be fully recovered. His marriage, his business, the years he'd missed of his daughter's lives, those were gone, permanently. But maybe, just maybe, there was still time to salvage something. Not the relationship he'd destroyed, but a new one, smaller, humbler, built on presence instead of promises, built on the man he was trying to become, not the man he used to be. The question was, did he have the courage to try? Or would pride claim one final victory and keep him trapped in the wreckage of his own making? Saturday morning would tell. And whatever happened, whether he showed up or not, whether Adana forgave him or not, whether he finally learned or not, one truth remained unchangeable. Respect is cheaper than regret. But regret lasts longer than wealth. And some men spend their whole lives learning that lesson one painful day at a time. The end. What do you think happens on Saturday at 10 a.m.? Does Tunde finally show up, or does he break another promise? Would you forgive him if you were Adana? Drop your thoughts below. If this story touched you, subscribe for more powerful life lessons wrapped in real stories, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes the best lessons come from other people's mistakes. Remember, the people who love you won't wait forever. Show up while you still can.